Good afternoon and welcome back to my Harlem Portraits. For the second episode with the Honorable Inez Dickens, we had so much to talk that we decided we had to do at least 2 episodes. Make it. But most of the things. So I would like, we talked about the current situation with Black Lives Matters, the COVID and so on. Now I would like to ask you a political question. Why do you think that during this June 23rd primary, there were a lot of congressional seats and assembly seats lost, incumbent lost, but Harlem managed to retain its incumbent? What do you think the reason was?
Well, number one, today there's a wave across America of against incumbencies.
They want new faces.
People want to see new faces without an understanding that, particularly in Congress, the longer you serve, the stronger you get, the more money you're able to secure for your communities, and the better committees you will not only serve on, but that you will be the chairpersons of. That's how it actually works on all 3 levels of government. It particularly negatively impacts upon Black communities. And it's funny because term limits actually started with a man who ran for mayor, and because he got mad because he lost, he turns around, and that was Estee Lauder's son. He turns around and started a petition in order to change the New York City charter so that there would be term limits, 2 term limits. It's 4 years to a term in the city council. And so you have to run every 4 years. In the assembly and the state senate, New York State Senate, it's 2-year, and you have to run every 2 years.
Very short.
Very, very short. And that means that when you go into the assembly, and same for Congress, congressional is also 2 years. You have to run every 2 years. And on even years, the state and the federal is every 2 years on the even. And the city council and the borough presidents are 4 years on the odd years. Yeah. And so what happens is that if you go into Congress or the Senate or the Assembly, you go in as a novice, as a freshman. And you don't have much staff. Your budget is low because you get the lowest budget because you're brand new, you're a freshman. You don't know where the John is, to be perfectly honest. And you don't get any power until you've been in there for several years. Now, that's just the truth of the matter. And this man that I told you about, he started this about having term limits. Well, see, that's term limits started when Black people started getting elected in mass and becoming 50% of the electorate. That's when it became a problem, and everybody wanted to make a change. Originally, it did not start with about we want to see just a new face, because seeing a new face, when you get a new face, they're not going to be able to do a doggone thing for you, or for the community, I should say, really, when they're a freshman. And that's just a fact of life. It's just like going on a job. You don't get an increase your first year or 2 on any job you go on, because you're brand new and you just got there and you got to learn the steps in how you can rise in that company. Well, the same thing goes when you're elected to any of the 3 levels of government. You have to learn, it's like a company, and you got to learn the steps. So for Black people, and actually for brown people, I tell them all the time, think about it. it requires to have seniority. That we do not, and when someone hollers, oh, what I can do, I can bring housing, I can bring money, I can bring this, and I can bring that, and they're freshmen, and they're just hollering that, I tell people, look at them and know they're lying to you, because they're not going to do any of that when they're freshmen. It just is not going to happen. So, I tell people all the time, don't listen to that. Think for yourselves. Don't let somebody else think for you by telling you something that suits them, because all they want to do is put in their person. And if you find, after you've given an opportunity to an electorate, to an elected to do their job, after 6 years or so, and they don't do it, then you can always vote them out. You don't need somebody else to tell you to vote them out. You don't need some other organization coming in and tell you, vote them out. You have that in your hand to do that. That's what Adam Powell tried to tell Black people in this community 60 years ago. Is in your hand. Your power is in your hand. And don't give your power away to anybody else coming into your community suddenly and saying, oh, I got a better idea, because they don't.
That's very important. And that brings us to the very important moment we are in, especially we are getting to in November with this vote, because this
Yes.
vote is going to be the most fundamental in my life for sure.
Well, it's important in November, Maria. It's important that we all come out and vote. Yeah. And we cannot afford in this election. See, that's the one office. President is 4 years. But that's the one office where it's not the king, so to speak. It's not the president, because it's the House of Representatives, it's Congress, and it's the Senate. That's important, and that can override something that the president does. So we need to get him out as a symbol of what he's done. The fact that he wanted to build a wall between the United States and Mexico, the fact that he tore children from their mother's breasts, babies, when immigrants sought solace and sought support in this country. This country is built on immigrants. There's nobody in this country that can say that they were not immigrants except Black people, and that's because we were forced here. We were brought here as slaves. We did not voluntarily come here seeking help. There's not one person other than Blacks are the only ones that can say we were forced here. Everybody else came of their own free will, seeking help and solace. Black people were forced here in bondage, in slaves, in shackles, in chains, and forced into this country. So, here is a man who, by the way, has never married an American citizen that was born here, by the way. I want everybody to think about that. And yet he turns around and brought in Russia to oversee our election last year, not last year, but in 2016, and people were hollering, oh, her emails, Hillary Clinton's emails. What difference does that make? Now, if we hadn't listened to that hokum that the Republican Party was whipping on us, and we had gone ahead and voted, we wouldn't have been under this siege that this country, that immigrants, that Blacks, and in fact, whites, the middle class wouldn't be under now, because he made all kind of promises to the Midwest about how he was going to bring back jobs and bring back the factories. He did none of that. And it wasn't going to happen, but yet that's what he promised. And Middle America, because of his far east, he was too far to the right. He was right wing, and that far right, and that's why so many people had trouble this year in election, because if they were centrists, they didn't get elected so easily if they were centrists. But if you were to the left, if you were to the extreme left, you got elected. So, but we cannot afford to have extreme right, and we cannot afford to have extreme left. If this country is going to be run fairly and without regard to race, creed, and gender, then it has to be centrist. It cannot be far right, nor can it be far left. And we have to bring this country, we have to bring these parties back to a more of a centrist way of thinking, rather than, because far right is dangerous. This is what we have in office now. And far left is can be just as dangerous. And we have to look at that. We have to think about it. And we have to think about our communities and what's best for our community and our cultures, what we need, and not be dictated to by outsiders coming in and making chicken poop look like chicken salad.
I would say that the far left you are referring to, which is Russia, is not even far left. Russia is fascist.
Yes.
They call themselves communists, but they're really fascist. It's an imperialistic country. It's a country that has a dictator. And here we are getting very near to that. And as an Italian, as a European living here, an Italian in particular, we've gone through Mussolini and we know what that means.
Yes.
And this guy looks very much like that.
Oh God, yes. Yes. So it's important. I am a Biden delegate. I'm a Joe Biden delegate. There's no way that anyone that thinks about what has been going on in the last 4 years can possibly vote for this man that's in office now, unless they're voting only on racism. That's the only way you can go along with him. You can't say it's about employment. You can't say it's about health, because he's tried to destroy Obamacare. Anything that President Obama instituted that was great and positive, he has tried to destroy just because it was a Black man that did it. And we've got to look at this. White people have to look at this. And if they're really going to tell me that they are fair and they're sincere about this being the America that welcomed their parents and their grandparents to this country, then there's no way they can possibly vote, because he did nothing for the economy. He has done absolutely nothing to open up anything in the Midwest economically. He has done absolutely nothing. He has no concept. And because he doesn't listen, see, most presidents listen to their cabinet. He doesn't. He attacks his own, he eats his own. He attacks those he has hired, and when they disagree with him, he fires them. And what person in their right mind would stand up on national television and tell the world that if you use Lysol on a hard surface, that it cleans, it takes away the germs. So maybe if you drink a little of it, it might clean your system out. And his own cabinet sat there, and you could see on their facial expressions how embarrassed they were that this man stood up and turns around and says, "Is that right? Is that right?" Expecting them to say yes. When on the can it says, on the bottle it says, "Do not ingest, dangerous, hazardous, will kill you." So I mean, and this is a man that he doesn't think, and that's possibly it. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, he's crazy." I don't think he's so crazy, because he's being touted as being a billionaire, yet every business that he's ever started using somebody else's money, and that's the way it's done in business. You use somebody else's money. That's the way it's done. You build with somebody else's money. They've always lost. See, if you try to build with somebody else's money, which you're supposed to do, they expect to get repaid.
Yep.
Almost everything. He doesn't own Trump Towers downtown. So, I mean, we need to look at this and see. That's what happened 4 years ago. People believed in that. Oh my God, he's a millionaire, so he knows or a billionaire, he knows what he's doing. And he didn't know what he was doing, because every business he's done, he's failed. So, I mean,
In Europe, we knew that very well.
People didn't look at this. So I don't think he's so great. I think that I think he's so racist and so into himself that he says and does things that he's smart enough to do what he wants to do, what he wants to do. But the funny thing, when Nixon was part of breaking into the Democratic national offices, the Republicans themselves went to him and told him resign the presidency. The Republicans did that. The Republicans, these young Republicans, they're not doing that. Instead, they're upholding this man. And really, the thinking Republicans, the older Republicans, they want him out. The older Republicans, they know this is not the man to represent the Republican Party. But yet, the younger ones are going along with him. But years ago, the Republicans demanded that Nixon wasn't going to step down. Look at history. Nixon stepped down because the Republicans told him, we're not supporting you, step down. You're out of office. And that's what this Republican Party should do.
The Party is scared of Trump. Scared.
But if the Republican Party tells him to get out of office, he would have no choice but to get out of office. He would lose if the Republican Party did not support him for re-election. He would lose. So there's no reason for them to be scared of him. There's no reason, because they, just like they did with Nixon, and Nixon did as he was told. He got out of office. This man would either get out of office or he would lose the election. If the Republican Party came up with another candidate, he would be out of office. If the Republican Party, because they have a convention just like the Democrats do. They do the same thing. The Republicans do the same thing. And blacks used to be, up until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, black people were Republicans, by the way. We were Republicans. And because Franklin, really Eleanor, I give it credit to the wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, because she had her husband to bring in Social Security. And because Madame Bethune supported her agenda so strongly, blacks then changed and became Democrats. But up until the 40s, we were Republicans.
Well, the Republican Party was the party that was for open.
Yes.
On. It was like inverted.
The first NYCHA built in Harlem was built by the Republicans. Harlem River Drive was built by the Republicans right here in Harlem. That was the first NYCHA built here.
Wow, incredible. History has to be taken into account.
You have to know your history so that you don't repeat the bad.
Same mistake.
And you take in and utilize the good, the necessary, what you can formulate into what's done today. But you discard that which is bad. But you have to know the history in order to do that. And so in November, I pray that we will vote this man out. Vote this man out. I mean, Biden, there's no way Biden could be anywhere near. Biden doesn't even think the way this man does.
Yeah. The whole world is hoping that, because what he has done, he has destroyed this country, but he is destroying the world. He's putting the world in danger by getting out of the Paris Climate Agreement, by getting out of the
World Health
Iran Agreement.
And the World Health Organization, he defunded them. And then World Health has been the leader in fighting pandemics. And yet he came along and defunded them. And by the way, there was a pandemic office that had been started actually by Bush. Bush Jr. had really started a pandemic office. And every president since that time continued to fund it, albeit they did reduce funding to it. They were still keeping that office open up through Obama.
Yes.
And here this man comes and totally disbands it and defunds it totally and destroys that office.
And that's one of the reasons why where we are now, because we weren't prepared.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go to Harlem and the African American community, which has been hit quite much harder than anybody else in this pandemic, not only from the health point of view, but also economically. How did the impact, what was the impact of the micro and small businesses, and what kind of programs are available for the community of color to assist?
The small businesses were adversely affected. The micro businesses almost became non-existent. Harlem and the Harlems across New York City are made up of micro businesses. And even though now SBS Small Business has both the city and the state and the feds have stepped up with various programs of grants, various programs of low interest loans for 30 years, even with all of that, that for the most part didn't get into the micro businesses. Now, with the first stimulus money coming down, that took care of the big business. The big boys got it. Now, let's be honest about it. That's what happened. The big business got it. Then they came down with the 3.5. They came down with the second stimulus package, which was supposed to be there to help the small business. And it went to the CDFIs, it went to the smaller banks in order to try to go into the small and micro small businesses of minority communities. And see, minority for years was just Black. That definition of minority has changed and expanded severely so that when we talk about MWBE, we're also talking about white women, not just Black men and women-owned businesses or brown men and women-owned businesses, but we're talking about white women-owned businesses, which frequently is really owned by their husbands or friends, etc. Not all the time. So I don't want it to seem like I'm saying that all the time, because that's not so. But because of that expansion, it's been very difficult for it to get into the Black and brown communities. So we have, like for instance, Columbia University. Mm-hmm. I worked with them in order for them to do a program. The borough president had gotten a program with Columbia, the School of Business, where they were assisting the small businesses to write their plans in order to get some of the PPE monies that were being given out by the larger banks and by the CDFIs. But now, because there still was a vacancy, a vacuum, Columbia University opened up a program, a lending program themselves, mm-hmm. where a micro business, and I assisted them with this, a micro business can now apply directly to Columbia University, not the hospital, but to Columbia University, in order to get a grant or a small loan with low interest and longer payment terms. UMES, although they cannot lend the money through the stimulus package, they were helping carve a bank, a Black bank that services Harlem, Brooklyn, and I think they have a branch in Queens. They were giving out to micro businesses, but mostly it was to the small businesses that UMES was familiar with in other words, the outreach wasn't there. It was to businesses that had already applied to UMES for in the years past, or was familiar to UMES, that was able to avail themselves of getting that assistance that went from UMES to Carver. But if you were not already a part of the UMES family, you had a lot more difficulty in accessing that. But the West Harlem Development Court has now also has a small lending package and a grant package that's available to the micro businesses. In fact, I had a WebEx about a month ago that's geared towards the micro small businesses. I had them all to come on, along with Columbia, along with SBS, along with some of the banks, the CDFIs, so that they could have answers. It's no point in having a lot of WebExes that we talk and discuss about the problem. We all already know the problem.
Yes.
It's what's the answer. We need some answers around here. And so I wanted my WebEx to be an answer. You can raise the question, but then there's got to be an answer to come to it following. So that was the purpose of the WebEx that I did, was to provide some resources, and also Melba Wilson of Melba's Restaurant. She gave out her, generously gave out her email and said she would assist any business. She was successful in getting some of the PPE monies available, and she was willing to help any of the micro businesses in trying to be able to be successful in securing funding as well. So I'm grateful to her, because not everybody offers to reach back after they are able to get it. Not everybody reaches back and says, let me pull you up along with me. But she recognized that when you are alone, standing alone, then you can be picked off at any time. That it takes the village. It takes several of us standing together, united. And also the 100 Black men through Hennessy it was able to get some funding that they're giving out as a grant, not as, so it starts out as a loan, but if you stay in business, I think for 3 years, then it becomes a grant. You just have to stay in business for 3 years. So they're giving out grants, and they're hoping that with their success, they will be able to get a second package of funding from Hennessy in order to do this. Also, American Express. But I believe they were only doing it if you already had an American Express account. But American Express also, they didn't advertise as much, but they were doing some micro lending to the smaller businesses. If you already, even a personal account. I know of several people who were able to access through American Express. I don't know all the terms, but everyone I spoke to, the several that I spoke to that was able to access through American Express, they are very happy with the terms that they were able to secure through that. So there were a lot of different agencies that were providing funding opportunities, but there's another one that came out through the state of New York, but it was a low interest loan, but it was only for mid-sized businesses, actually, not the micro small or the small. And we do have some small mid-sized businesses in Harlem, and it's called Main Street. And you could be able to get a loan. Theirs was not a grant, there was a loan, and of which you did go to the bank to apply, but the federal government was going to guarantee up to about 75% of the loan. And the balance of 25% or 15%, whatever, would be the bank's responsibility, so that they'd have some skin in the game to keep them honest, to be truthful about it. But that was what it was for. But that the bulk of the loan would be guaranteed by the federal government. But again, that was not for the small or the micro small. It was only for the mid-sized businesses.
Not the mom and pop.
Main Street. They were Main Street loans. There was 2 or 3 different ones that you could qualify for. But again, it was only for for-profit businesses. It was not for not-for-profit organizations. It was for Main Street was for businesses and not for not-for-profits.
Thank you so much again for what you are doing, because you're giving all this information. I know that Pat Stevenson, the Harlem News, also managed to get a loan, and she published that, and that came from the Women's Chambers of Commerce. Through the Women's Chambers of Commerce, this was published around. So it's very important that when people obtain this kind of possibilities, also help others to go.
Amsterdam News was able to get funding. Unfortunately, Carib News has not been able to avail themselves of any opportunities, and I'm going to try to help them within the next week or 2 to try to see if I can help them with trying to get funding. But several of our newspapers, Black-owned newspapers, were able to be able to secure some funding, maybe not everything that they needed, but some funding in order to help them during this downtime when businesses were closed. And see, that's the other thing. Businesses were closed for, 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah.
Which meant no excise tax was collected because nobody could, there was nothing open to buy things. You could, the supermarkets remained open, and I commend all the essential workers. I commend the pharmacies that stayed open. I commend the supermarkets that stayed open and their workers. The supermarket workers, they became essential workers when they didn't think that they would be, but they were on the same level with our doctors, our nurses, our LPNs. I thank all the essential workers. I thank the subway workers, the MTA, Local 100. I commend them. They were all, because they kept the subways going, they kept the buses riding, and you rode the bus for free. You didn't have to pay to get on the bus. You rode for free. And I'm thankful to MTA because they have took on necessarily to sanitize those subways, and they look 100% better. I don't know whether it's 100% free of the virus, because the minute someone gets on without a mask and there's no social distancing and somebody coughs into their hand and then holds onto the pole, the germ is out there. But they are sanitizing and has sanitized 100% of the subways and the buses, and I'm grateful for that, because at least that's a big help, because the essential workers had to use public transportation to get to the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, the LPS, those that worked in the kitchen, and those that were the maintenance crew in the hospitals and the nursing homes. They all were essential workers, along with the MTA workers, the Local 100, along with the supermarket and the pharmacy workers. So I'm grateful to all of them for what they did to keep the city moving, but excise tax was not paid. And that also means that real estate tax is not going to be paid. And taxes make up more than 55% of the budget. So that means 55% of the budget is not going to be at the state this year.
I didn't know that you didn't have to pay real estate taxes now.
Yes, I didn't say you didn't have to. That's not what I said. I said that it's going to be nearly impossible for many to pay the real estate taxes. And between the excise tax and the real estate tax, that makes up anywhere between 51 and 55% of the state budget. So that means the balance of the budget is what's going to have to carry the entire state, and that's not going to work. That's why we've been trying to get funding from the federal government, and the New York delegation has been fighting so hard to try to get that money. But right now, even though it passed in Congress, the Republican Senate has said no. And that's because New York only has 2 senators fighting. The rest of the senators come from other states, and they're saying, take it to my states, don't give it to New York. So, you know, that's why it's so important that we have seniority in that Senate, because that will hopefully carry some weight in order for them to be able to secure some additional funding that we dearly need from the federal government.
Well, this federal government has been failing everybody in every field. So.
Yes.
Let's talk about another important thing that you have been doing, the distribution of food and masks and sanitizer that you've been involved in during all.
Well, I got masks several times. The city of New York, the mayor, de Blasio, distributed masks to the electeds for us to put into our communities. By giving it to the electeds, it assured that it would get into the community, into the NYCHA developments, into the senior buildings, into family buildings, into organizations that do the work, versus just giving it to one organization, because then it wouldn't be distributed district-wide. So I thank him for that. The governor and Governor Cuomo and my speaker, Carl Hastie, has several times given sanitizers so that all of us in the Assembly and the Senate were able to distribute sanitizers, both the small little 2-ounce bottles and the large gallon bottles with pumps. We were able to, we gave it out at NYCHAs, and all my NYCHAs were able to get sanitizers and masks. I gave it out at senior buildings. I also went to various churches. I went to Memorial Baptist. I went to Friendship. I went to Abyssinia. I went to St. Aloysius Roman Catholic. I went to several of the churches. If they were open, they got sanitizers and masks. And now, when I went around, if they weren't open, I couldn't.
Oh, whatever. And that was gold.
And so I was able to do that. And then with the help of, for instance, Yasmin Cornelius, who is the state committee woman for the 70th Assembly District, she helped me to get food from a pantry in Brooklyn in order to give food out to my senior building on 140th Street between Adam Clayton Powell and Malcolm X Boulevard. We gave fresh vegetables and fruit. We gave strawberries. We gave potatoes. We gave collard greens. We gave cauliflower. We gave broccoli. We gave oranges. We gave apples. We gave bags of rice and chicken out to those seniors so that they could prepare their own nutritional food, and it would be the way they need. If they were diabetic, then it would be prepared the way they needed. Yes. I also was able to, a restaurant on the Upper West Side that asked to do it anonymously, gave me food to cooked food to distribute at another senior building, which is on 124th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, Sydenham, the old Sydenham school, not Sydenham Hospital. They were, I was able to distribute food there. Also, the farmers market from downtown, with the help of district leader Keith Lilly, I was able to get bags of groceries that I was able to distribute to Drew Hamilton, that I was able to get help to feed Drew Hamilton. Also, World Foods gave me hot food that we distributed at Drew Hamilton. Thanks to the Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams, and the Muslims, the mosque, the Brooklyn Mosque of Muslims, they came to 114th Street to A. Philip Randolph between Frederick Douglass and Adam Clayton Powell, and they cooked halal meals on site. They cooked halal meals on site and gave hot meals to the families there, because A. Philip Randolph is a NYCHA, but it's not a senior building, it's families. And also the borough president brought groceries that we distributed there, as well as to HCCI, Dr. Malcolm Punter, to one of his senior sites on 118th Street at 5th Avenue. We were able to distribute bags of groceries. And I went around and personally knocked on every door and gave it. I left, I had a mask on, but so that I would not cause any harm, health harm to anyone, but I personally went in. I also was able to, thanks to Larry Scott Blackman and Fresh Direct, I was able to deliver boxes and boxes of fresh food, fresh groceries to Lincoln, which is a NYCHA development. I was able to give them food, thanks to Fresh Direct and Larry Scott Blackman. I was able to take care of them. And then Frederick Samuels, which is also a NYCHA, I was able to work with Donald Notice and the West Harlem Group Assistance. I was grateful to God that I was able to provide funding and created a pantry through that assistance program, and opened a pantry on Malcolm X Boulevard at 142nd Street. And we were able to get a memorandum of understanding that one day a week, only families from Fred Samuels NYCHA would come in and get fresh groceries. One day a week, they come in and get fresh groceries every week just from Fred Samuels. And I was able to get another memorandum of understanding with the same West Harlem Group Assistance, Donald Notice, where once a week they do a pop-up at Drew Hamilton on 143rd Street, and also a pop-up again at A. Philip Randolph. So and now we're working on doing a full day, a pop-up at St. Nicholas, and also at Taft Rehab. Taft Rehab is in my district. So, and I also, I'm grateful, I was also able to distribute food, thanks to Fresh Direct, to Grant and Manhattanville, both over in West Harlem. I was able to distribute food, masks, and sanitizer to both Grant and Manhattanville. So I'm really grateful that I was able to secure what I was able to do. Also, Greater Harlem, the Greater Harlem Commerce, no, Lloyd Williams, the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, Lloyd Williams, he was able to secure to get funding for food, and was able to give out food, and I was assisting him in the distribution of food from his church on Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard and 131st Street. We were able to give out food from Salem, so that people could go once a week and get groceries, bring their shopping cart and get fresh groceries from there, thanks to Lloyd Williams and the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce. So, we were trying to see to it that we distributed flyers, by the way, to to St. Nicholas, to let them know about coming to Salem, because it's within a 2-block walking area. So we were,
been doing a lot.
We were able to see that they got masks.
Fundamental work, because
and also, I was able to get Donald Notice and the West Harlem Group Assistance to give food also to the chamber for the buildings on 135th Street, between Frederick Douglass and between Frederick Douglass and Adam Clayton Powell, to the buildings that's on the north side, opposite of the 32nd Precinct. We were able to give food to the chamber and to the New Harlem Heritage Theater, which is Rosa Rivers, so that food could be distributed to those buildings as well. So God blessed me to be able to help. I'm still giving out sanitizer and masks. I'm still trying to get food. And I also just received a call from the McDonald's Corporation, just yesterday, in fact, from the McDonald's Corporation. And they want to give a sizable donation to whatever food pantry I want them to give it to. And I'm choosing, because they've done so well in distributing throughout Harlem, the West Harlem Group Assistance. I asked them to please share that with West Harlem Group Assistance, because it was unexpected. I'm thankful to McDonald's for doing that, for reaching out to me and being willing to, wherever I'm asking, to give it to one of my choice in my community. And so I'm grateful, because that will be able to sustain and help the West Harlem Group Assistance to continue with their pop-up grocery distribution centers and their food distribution centers throughout Harlem. So I'm happy about that, and I'm grateful to God that I was able to secure that for them.
That's because you've been working very hard.
Well, you know, it takes a village. I wasn't doing it alone. That's why I gave credit to District Leader Keith Lilly. I gave credit to Yasmin Cornelius. I gave credit to anybody, the 100 Black men who went and fed Harlem Hospital. So did Melba's Restaurant go to Harlem Hospital and do food. So did Vi Higginson go and make a contribution to Harlem Hospital. So I'm grateful, because it takes all of us to work together. No one person can do it alone. All of the electeds, all of us, I'll call us the new gang of five. Senator Brian Benjamin, Assembly Member Robert Rodriguez, Assembly Member Al Taylor, Senator Robert Jackson, and myself. We all try to work together to help one another. Al Taylor gave out several times to families in his district food and masks and sanitizer, thanks primarily to World Food Kitchen and to Keith Lilly. So, you know, we all work together to try to do what had to be done for our community.
This is fantastic. It is a fundamental job to cooperate, because if you don't cooperate, then it's not effective, the work.
That's exactly right. And we, you know, frequently electeds don't cooperate with one another.
No.
The five of us have been trying to cooperate with one another for legislation and to support one another in the budget, which has been non-existent this year. But in the past, we've tried to work with one another to support for funding and for budgetary needs and for legislation. The five of us try to work together on a state level, try to work together to ensure that we are able to get what we need for our community. So we really have been trying to work together, and people tell me that they've never seen Harlem work together like we're trying to do now. I also went to 3333 Broadway, which is a large development. It's not a NYCHA, but it's a huge development, and I was able to take over to Alicia Boxdale some food for her seniors in order to give out. So I'm just grateful, and Maria, you know, like I said, you don't do it by yourself. I'm not going to take all the credit for myself.
There has to be someone who connects all the people,
yes.
and that's what you have been doing. We only have 1 minute.
Okay.
Let's say something about the youth programs, because there are some organizations.
My youth programs are so important, and particularly with the recent surge in violence. I'm not going to say gang violence, but surge in violence in the communities. It's important that our youth organizations are supported. Isha Sekou, I Am Peace.
She's fantastic.
Street Corner Resources, Harlem Mother Save, which basically works with the parents who have lost children to violence, to gun violence, but they work with the youth as well, and they have a doctor on site to do mental health, to help to address mental health issues. Rosa Rivers with the Impact Kids. Those kids are great, and they perform frequently in order to raise the level of feeling of worth, self-worth, and value with our young people. Vi Higginson, the Mama Foundation, she takes in youth and tries to shape them into not only being able to sing, perform, dance, act, but also behind the scenes. And Gail Brewer, myself, and at the request of Aisha Sekou, we built at the Renaissance School at 128th Street and Madison Avenue, we built a site and an educational tool where our youth can learn how to, because everybody can't sing and everybody can't dance. I can't sing a lick. But, they can learn how to do film behind the scenes, how to do broadcasting behind the scenes, how they do recording behind the scenes, so that these are still valuable jobs that pay well, and yet our young people are able to do things that they themselves enjoy. Now, we need to bring back a lot of programs, and everybody talks about the sports, and it's all important. Omar spoke about it yesterday. It's important that these programs be brought back. But along with that comes the level of respect that must be done, that must be secured, that must happen in order for there to really be a change. We've done legislation. We passed 11 pieces of legislation, both in the Senate and the Assembly, for police reform. The governor signed, I think, 4 or 5 of them. He didn't sign all of them. But regardless, legislation is one thing. But we have to have change of policy in order to really make an effective change.
Yes, absolutely. And we need to stop and conclude here on this note.
I want to thank you, Maria, for all that you do to showcase our community, so that people won't continue to think negatively about Harlem Hospital, or think negatively about Harlem. That just like all these people now want to come into Harlem and move into Harlem, that people around the world will begin to recognize the jewel that Harlem really, really is. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, because the reason why I'm doing this is that Harlem welcomed me so incredibly that it made me feel home. And once you feel home, you have to give back to home. So that's my way of giving back.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thanks to MNN, great station, great local station.
Fantastic, because it gives the people the opportunity of speaking out.
Absolutely.
That's fundamental.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you again for being with
us.
Thanks again. Thank you for all your work. Good luck with everything. Best wishes with everything. And thank you for being with us. And we see you next Saturday, 12:30 as usual. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.